WLQV. WLQV is a radio station serving the Detroit, Michigan market. The station's 50,000-watt daytime signal on 1500 AM enables it to be heard from Michigan's Thumb area down to northwest Ohio, and from Lansing, Michigan to Chatham, Ontario, Canada. WLQV has a Christian talk format. WJBK, ABK, WDEE. At midnight on December 26, 1969, WJBK changed to a contemporary country music format and changed its calls to WD. Many joked at the time that the calls stood for "We've Done Everything Else." Former WJBK personality Mark Avery recalled in 1971, when interviewed for the WDRQ program The History of Detroit Radio, that WJBK had been considering switching to country as far back as the early 1960s. At the time, 1340 Wlqv was the only full-time country music station in the immediate Detroit market, with Ypsilanti-based WSDS as its only competitor. WD distinguished itself with its slick, contemporary countrypolitan approach to the country format, designed for mass appeal, and was one of the first stations to program country and Western music with a top 40 style presentation. The move paid off with frequent top 5 showings in the Detroit ratings during the 1970s. With only 1,000 watts of power, Wlqv was unable to compete with 50,000-watt WD and left the country format by 1974 for religious programming. WD's midday show, the Femme Forum, in which host Tom Dean fielded calls from female listeners sharing their sexual frustrations, was a controversial feature for its time, but also quite popular. Other personalities on the station during the 1970s included morning mainstay Dino Day, Hank O'Neill, Mike Scott, Dave Williams, Bob Burchett, Ray Otis, Randy Price, Doug Smith, Don Thompson, Jimmy Bear, Rosalie, Paul Allen, Bob Day, Ron Ferris, Dan Dixon, and Rick Church. In the early 1970s, WD was purchased by Combined Communications, who in turn would eventually be purchased by the Gannett Company. Previous to combined ownership, WD was part of a broadcast chain owned by Globe Broadcasting, owned by the Harlem Globetrotters. Also during this time, WDFM changed to news/talk as WDRQ-FM. That lasted until 1972, when Charter Broadcasting bought WDRQ and switched to Top 40, using such memorable slogan as "IQ in my car." 4 decades and several formats later, that station is now playing contemporary country music again under Cumulus Media ownership as Nash FM. The WD calls later had a brief revival as a daytime-only classic country music station in Reed City, Michigan, coincidentally also at AM 1500. This station has since gone off the air, but the calls survive on its one-time FM sister station, WDFM, which runs an oldies format as Sunny 97.3. WLQV/WCZY. In early 1979, WCAR picked up the country format and became WCXI Country 11, featuring Dino Day and other former WD personalities. In the latter part of 1979, after less than a year due to a terrible directional signal and WCXI overtaking them in the ratings, the country format was abandoned, and the station's call sign was changed to WCZY and ran a more contemporary version of sister station WCZY-FM, highly rated, easy listening music format, the Tuesday. About a year later, the calls changed to WLQV. The calls were meant to designate the word love and featured a religious format. In 1985, with Z95.5 featuring future Radio Hall of Fame inductee Dick Purton, much was made of Purton's return to AM radio. However, the simulcast ended during the summer of 1987 when WCZY-AM was sold, returned to a religious format, and changed back to the WLQV call letters. In 1986, Gannett purchased the Detroit News and under Federal Communications Commission guidelines against cross-ownership of stations within a market, sold WLQV to former Gannett President Joe Dorton. In 1987, Mike Blinter's satellite radio network purchased WLQV. John Yinger's Midwest Broadcasting Corporation, too, a small chain of religious stations in the Midwest, bought WLQV in December 1993. Under the ownership of Yinger, a former Gannett GSM and GM of Satellite Radio Network, WLQV retained the Christian talk format and generated a loyal following with a niche group of listeners. The station's programming featured nationally known evangelists and teachers such as Billy Graham, Dr. J. Vernon McGee, Charles Stanley, and others, along with Detroit area pastors and preachers. This formula stayed in place through the mid-2000s. Yinger owned WLQV longer than any other owner, with the exception of Storer. Yinger oversaw and completed WLQV's long-standing application for increased nighttime power. In 2003, WLQV commenced operating with 9 towers at night, 10,000 watts of power, ending an 18-year standoff with WTOP and KSTP. By this time, Yinger's company would be known as the Christian Broadcasting System, a group of 9 stations, and a satellite network. CBSL owned WLQV until its sale to Salem. Under Yinger's ownership, the station went by the name Victory 1500, using the same brand name as then sister stations WSNL in Flint and WLCM in Lansing. WLQV today. In February 2006, WLQV was sold to Salem Communications, the country's top family of Christian-oriented stations, in exchange for a cash sum and 2 stations in Cincinnati. The station's operations were handled thereafter by a subsidiary of Salem, Karen Broadcasting, who moved the studios from suburban Livonia to downtown Detroit's Penobscot building. In mid-September 2006, the station moved from the Penobscot building to its new studio site in Ferndale. Except for minor changes in programming and station structure, WLQV still boasts a Christian talk format. For several years in the 2010s, WLQV was the Detroit area affiliate of the Rocket Sports Radio Network, broadcasting University of Toledo football and select men's basketball games, as well as the coaches' shows for both sports. On November 18, 2016, sister station WDTK moved its FM repeater from 92.7 FM to 101.5 W268CN. Its former repeater on 92.7 W224CC was kept active and repurposed as a repeater for WLQV. Antenna system. The station's transmitter is located on Dix Toledo Road just south of I 75 in Lincoln Park. The station has a highly directional antenna system. There had been 12 towers arranged in 4 parallel sets of 3 towers from the time of their upgrade to 50,000 watts in the early 1960s until the demolition, or the easternmost 3 towers, the original mid-1950s. A view of this array is visible in aerial images and topographic maps of the era. This site is just west of Dix Highway, near its intersection with Emmons Boulevard. In the early 1990s, the easternmost set was taken down to make room for a Super Kmart store which opened in 1994. That store closed in 2003 during Kmart's second round of bankruptcy and reopened as a major in 2004.